The paper slid across the dining table like a knife in daylight. "Since you're living here full-time now," my stepmother said, her voice sweet and metallic, "it's only fair you contribute $1,200 a month should cover rent and utilities." She smiled like it was math, not malice. I looked down at the paper, typed neatly, printed, even highlighted, tenant agreement. My signature line waited, empty and obedient. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Rent? For my grandparents' house?" Her 2 kids were on their phones, smirking. "It's Mom's place now," one of them muttered. My father didn't look up from his coffee. That hurt more than the words. "I'm Maya, 27, and I live in Seattle. I sell houses for a living, but this one, my grandparents' home, is where my heart is. I grew up on this street, under this roof, in the house with the white porch and the old oak tree out front. My grandfather built it himself after the war, and my grandmother filled it with jasmine and music. Every corner of this house carries a memory, and every brick feels like a piece of who I am. When they passed, the house became my anchor. My father was too busy, starting over. That's what he called marrying the woman who now sat across from me, filing me under extra expense. She moved in with her 2 kids, less than 6 months after the funeral. Within a week, my grandmother's piano was pushed into the garage, replaced by a marble bar cart. Within 2 months, the living room turned into her vision board corner. I told myself I'd survive it, that keeping the peace was better than confrontation. But peace has a cost, and she kept raising the rent. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen, with only the refrigerator hum for company. The tenant agreement lay in front of me, next to an empty mug and my grandmother's framed photo. Her voice echoed in memory. "Never let greed make you small." I pulled open the bottom drawer of the old oak desk. Inside was a worn manila folder. My grandfather's handwriting still covered the corner. "Trust for Maya." I hadn't touched it in years. I used to think it was sentimental, something he left me to remember him by. But as I unfolded the papers, the words cut through the fog like light through water. "This property and its contents shall remain in the legal and full ownership of my granddaughter, Maya Reynolds, sole beneficiary." My breath caught. I read it again, then again. The ink hadn't faded. The notary stamp was real. The house was mine. All this time, while she redecorated, while she belittled, while she called me a burden she'd been living off a lie. The next morning, she stood in the kitchen in her silk robe, waving her phone. "Just so you know," she said, "I expect rent by the 5th. Venmo's fine." I smiled. "Of course," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. Then I poured coffee, steady and calm. That was the first day she mistook silence for surrender. Later, as I left for work, her kids were by the door laughing about how Maya finally knows her place. I smiled again. The truth was already blooming in my pocket, a photocopy of the trust, folded neatly beside my car keys. I drove to the office, parked by the water, and sat for a long time staring at the city skyline. The feeling wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. In real estate, people think value is about property. It's not. It's about ownership, who truly holds the deed, who signs the paper, who can walk away with their head high. I wasn't going to fight her in the kitchen. I was going to fight her on paper, where truth always leaves a trail. That night, I took the printed tenant agreement and slipped it into the folder with the trust. I labeled it Evidence Exhibit A. The game had started, and she didn't even know she was already evicted. They say revenge begins with rage. They're wrong. It begins with order, with a folder, a pen, and silence. I didn't throw the tenant agreement away. I filed it. I didn't argue. I observed. Because when people think you're small, they leave their guard wide open. The next morning, my stepmother's voice drifted through the hallway. "Her car's a mess again," she whispered to her son. "If she's staying here rent-free, the least she can do is be useful." Rent-free. That word tasted like ash, considering the mortgage had been paid off before I was born. My grandparents built this house brick by brick, their sweat, my inheritance. But she stood in their kitchen like a queen, sipping coffee from the mug my grandmother used to love. I left quietly, locking the door behind me. I'd stopped reacting. That was the first sign the tide had turned. At work, I printed a copy of the trust. Then another. Then a notarized copy. My colleague Ben, who handled legal paperwork for the agency, glanced over. "Estate transfer?" he asked. "Correction," I said. "Restoration." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I think he knew not to ask. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. Case 1. Inside, I saved every photo of the house before she changed it, before the walls were painted beige, before the piano was buried in boxes, proof of what had been mine long before she arrived. Days turned into quiet study. I gathered evidence the way she gathered gossip. Every insult she dropped, every "you're lucky to stay here," I typed and dated in a Word file. Every receipt she used for house expenses, things she bought with my grandparents' money, I photographed. By the end of the week, I had 62 images, 14 audio clips, and 9 pages of text. She had no idea. One evening, I caught her in the living room showing her kids their future, a real estate listing on her tablet. "This house," she told them, "will be yours one day. Grandpa's already talking about adding all our names to the deed." They nodded, smug and comfortable. I watched from the doorway and felt something unfamiliar, not anger, not even sadness. Pity, because she was building her kingdom on sand. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. Her name was Elena Grant, 40, sharp, patient. She had the calm energy of someone who'd seen every kind of family war. I laid the folder on her desk. Elena read in silence for several minutes, flipping through the trust, the notarization, and my documentation. Then she looked up. "You understand what this means?" "Yes," I said. "You don't just own this house. You control its legal narrative. She's a guest, at best a squatter, at worst." I nodded. "What do you want?" she asked. "Peace," I said. Then after a beat, "And precision." Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Then let's start with a title reaffirmation. Quiet title action, simple, discreet. It'll re-record the deed under your name alone. No drama. That's what I want." At home, things escalated. Her kids began borrowing my charger, my car keys, my clothes from the laundry. When I confronted them, she laughed. "They're just kids, Maya. You take everything so seriously." I smiled. Not everything. Inside, I was already rehearsing her eviction speech. By the 3rd week, I had what I needed: legal proof, behavioral evidence, and patience. Elena submitted the paperwork quietly. The house, once again, was registered to me fully, permanently, without contest. It was almost poetic how quietly the system worked when truth had ink behind it. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. On a Thursday night, she called me to the living room. "You haven't paid rent," she said, arms crossed. "You're 2 weeks late." I glanced at the folder on the coffee table. "You're right," I said. "Give me till Monday." She smirked. "Good. I'm tired of carrying you." As she turned away, I whispered, "You've been carried your whole life." She didn't hear it. Or maybe she did, and pretended not to. That night, I stood outside under the porch light. The same light my grandfather had installed. The same air my grandmother once filled with the smell of cookies. I looked up at the dark windows, the shadows moving inside hers, not mine, and felt the quiet weight of truth. Soon, she'd learn what rent really costs. She wanted a family meeting. I gave her one. The invitation went out on a Friday morning. Dinner at 7, house matters to discuss. My father agreed to come. Her kids, of course, never missed free food. By 6, the table was set the way my grandmother used to. Candles, linen napkins, quiet grace. I wanted the moment to feel sacred because truth always should. She arrived downstairs in a red dress and self-importance. "So, are we finally discussing rent?" she asked, half laughing. I smiled. Sort of. I waited until everyone was seated. Then I placed a single envelope in the middle of the table. Inside, neatly folded, were the trust papers notarized, dated, sealed. "Before we eat," I said softly, "there's something you should read." Her manicured fingers reached first. She skimmed the first paragraph, then stopped. Her expression stiffened. My father frowned. "What is this?" I answered, calm as breath. "The legal ownership of this property. My grandparents left it to me, exclusively." The air thinned. You could hear the clock tick. Her kids exchanged confused looks. She tried to laugh, but the sound cracked halfway out. That can't be right. Your father. They left on a Sunday afternoon, under gray light and silence. The moving truck stood in the driveway like a confession. Every time a box thudded against the metal ramp, the house seemed to breathe easier. I didn't watch them closely, just enough to know they were really going. Her red dress was gone. She wore jeans and a tired face. Her kids scrolled their phones, pretending not to care. But you could feel it, the panic beneath the quiet. By sunset, the door clicked shut for the last time. The next week, word spread through the neighborhood. Someone had seen the eviction notice. Someone else mentioned the frozen account. The story rewrote itself without me saying a word, from Maya stole the house to turns out it was hers all along. The same neighbors who once smiled too widely at my stepmother now nodded at me with quiet respect. Reputation is funny that way. Loud lies collapse fast when truth walks in wearing documentation. As for her, she moved into a rental 2 suburbs away. Her lifestyle didn't fit anymore. The cards stopped working. The shopping stopped clicking. Her kids withdrew from their private schools. One picked up shifts at a grocery store. The other, the older one, stopped bragging online about their family estate. I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. The world was simply balancing itself. 2 months later, a letter arrived. Her handwriting was still perfect. She always believed good penmanship could hide bad intent. "I hope you're happy now," it said. "You've ruined everything." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into the same folder where I'd once kept her rental agreement. Evidence of what happens when greed meets paper. The house is quiet again. I restored my grandmother's piano to the living room and repainted the walls the soft white she loved. The jasmine bloomed outside, unbothered by human drama. Some evenings I sit on the porch with coffee, listening to the city hum. I don't replay the shouting or the lies. I replay the stillness that followed the silence that came not from loss, but from return. Because revenge, when done right, isn't about pain. It's about restoration. It's about walking through your own front door and knowing you no longer owe anyone permission to be there. I locked the door one final time that night, the sound echoing down the hallway like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. They called me cold. They called me heartless. But standing there, surrounded by everything my grandparents built, I understood the truth. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just turns the key and closes the door behind it.